I'm JD Green. I've been a face on the radio in Vermont for well over 20 years. And although I've loved my career in radio, I had a vision about bringing my connection to the community to a different platform, to social media, where I could create a blueprint of a podcast that's something constantly evolving, knowing that there's always room for new experiences and learning, discovery, exploration, new questions to ask, and answers to be sought after. A program without limitations, but still with intention to tell a more in-depth story behind what makes us tick, what inspires us, what makes us realize that the what and when is only secondary to the how. And it's the how and the why that I want to uncover. It's my hope with this podcast that I can inspire, inform, that we can learn together and tell the bigger stories behind our lives. That's our story. My real story off the air. I'll try to push the boundaries, arouse your curiosity, and ask the questions you want answers to. Maybe questions no one's asked. The good and the not so good. What's going on in Vermont as well as across our great country. Things you'll agree with, things you might not. It's my hope to laugh with you, cry with you, entertain and enlighten you, but mostly learn with you. Please make sure to support your local public access TV station, subscribe to my YouTube podcast, Aired Out, engage by sharing your comments, and invite your friends to be part of it too. Thanks for tuning in. This is Aired Out. Welcome to Aired Out. I'm JD Green. You got us on a Wednesday night. Thanks so much for subscribing to the YouTube podcast and being part of all we do here at Fly in the Wall Productions and CVTV Public Access Television, channel 192 and 194. CVTV723.org is the website. Our sponsors of Aired Out: Peak Entertainment of Vermont and New Hampshire, weddings, parties, special events, peakdj.com, FGB Theaters, the Capitol Showplace in Montpelier, and Paramount Theater in Barrie, home of the FGB movie card and $5 Ticket Tuesdays. Gift cards, too, all at fgbtheaters.com. CBD Crave, superior quality brands shipped straight to your door. Quench the crave at cbdcrave.com. And Fontaine Forestry and Millworks of East Montpelier, native lumber, custom cut, rough, kiln dried, planed, tongue and groove, shiplap, and that hemlock bark that they're the bark mulch that they're getting ready to pack up by the yard or by the bag. Route 14, just below Bragg Farm in East Montpelier, and CW Print and Design in Barrie. If you've been in to see their new store, it is huge, right next to the old Lenny's outlet, which is still there and has been there for so long. CWPrintDesign.com. Welcome to the first day of spring. The first full day of spring is tomorrow. Weather forecaster Roger Hill is saying, a day with sunshine and 40s. We're going to have clouds and rain and snow showers moving into the picture tomorrow and Friday, with temperatures in the 40s and some gradual snow melting, and maybe a little bit of a sap run leading up to the weekend, which is great news. Want to give you another heads up here. Your first opportunity to officially get qualified for the Rolling Stones live in concert in Chicago on my morning show, 101 The One. Your first chance to get qualified is coming up on Monday. We're so excited about this. We let the cat out of the bag Monday morning on the air that we've got tickets for the Rolling Stones, a 5-day, 4-night trip for two, with not only tickets to the concert, but round-trip airfare, hotel accommodations, and we're throwing in $1,000 of spending cash for you to enjoy, too, in Chicago. It is going to be one amazing experience. The end of June is the date of this concert. And again, your first chance to start officially qualifying is coming up on Monday. If you get on 101theone.com, all the details are posted right there for you. Friday night, It is a one-on-one conversation about the hemp industry in Vermont with Ann Wallace Allen of VT Digger. I'm looking forward to that show very much. In the second half of Aired Out, I'm going to chat with the co-founder and CEO of Front Porch Forum, Michael Wood Lewis. Again, another one that I am looking forward to speaking with. Tonight, Vermont author Alan Mills tells the inspiration behind his book, Barnyards, Barefeet and Bluejeans. And I've got it right here in my hand. It is with great honor that we welcome Mr. Mills onto Aired Out this morning. I'm going to start out. First of all, thank you so much for making the trip up here. That's very kind of you to.
Well, and thank you for giving me this opportunity.
My pleasure. I'm going to start out by reading one of the reviews on Amazon that reads, "Although I grew up on a much smaller farm, this book brought back so many memories for me. Whether you grew up on a farm or not, this is a wonderful book for all ages. The author has a sense of humor and is a great storyteller. He had me laughing and crying throughout the book." This is the book right here in my hands. Now, this is your first book, am I right?
It is, yes.
So first off, let me begin by asking, how old are you?
74.
You're 74, and what made you decide at 70 some years old to be an author, to publish a book?
It's actually the inspiration from my youngest daughter. I was speaking to her one day as she was at the house recovering from an operation, and she was feeling kind of down about the whole thing, and we needed something better to talk about, so I started telling her old stories.
Wow.
And as I told her, she kind of forgot everything else that she was dwelling upon, and she felt better, and she said, "You have to write these down." And I said, well, I thought about it, but I hadn't done it because, well, I wasn't really a good student of grammar when I was in school, and there were certain parts of it that I avoided, outlines and things like that. And so she says, you just write them down, we'll organize them.
Oh, yeah.
And so she did all the editing in the book.
Well, this, as you're speaking, you're reminding me of Rusty Deweese. He has made it very well known that he also wasn't the greatest student, at least with regard to grammar and punctuation and spelling. But nonetheless, what a great storyteller, and had to tell the story. And he had folks that encouraged him and said, "Look, that's what copy editors are for," and
well, if you
they'll get it done for you.
If you kind of go back to Will Rogers. I never met a man I didn't like. With my case, I never met a teacher I didn't like. The only problem is I met a few that didn't like me. Well, they had good reasons.
Sure. So let's talk about. We're going to talk about the book, obviously, but this is a photograph of your farmland that you own in the village of Florence, which is the town of Pittsford.
That's correct.
Which is, we were just chatting before the show, which is right around Grandpa's Knob, which is just west of Rutland.
Yes.
Heading towards the edge of the hills of Castleton, am I right?
Right, yes. Yep.
So this is kind of the valley falling down out of the mountains, heading into the Rutland Valley there.
Yes.
Wow. How many acres?
There's 280 acres.
280 acres.
Yes.
And what's the story on the farmland here?
Well, it was the farmland is right now. It's being worked by a fifth generation of the family. We're not dairy farming anymore, but the land is still being used for raising crops and that sort of thing. And I do have one niece who's doing a little market gardening there and some sugaring. Yeah.
Wow. So this land goes back to How far now are we talking about?
My great-grandfather came to the area in 1950, and he started buying up land. Or excuse me, I said 1950, 1850.
I was wondering
Yeah.
about that. I was wondering
Yeah.
about that. 1850, just a few years before that.
Yes, he moved from Massachusetts, and he started buying up land, and he ended up owning 6 different farms there, and a square mile or excuse me, a mile square, which is a little larger than that.
Wow. So that was the start of it.
That was the start of it. Yes, he did a meat business, selling meat to the city of Rutland.
Wow.
Drove from the Whipple Hollow Road
Yeah.
to Rutland with a meat cart and sold meat out of there every day. So,
My goodness. And then we were dairy farmers as well?
yes, when my grandfather took it over, he was a dairy farmer, and my father continued in that vein.
Wow. Wow. So this is so remarkable that you still have the land here, and it's now owned by you and your sisters, I
Yes.
think, right?
Yeah, myself and my 3 sisters.
And you're hanging on to it for, you're not going to put any condos up in there anytime soon.
No.
Good for you. We're losing our farms, man. We're losing them fast.
Yes, well, and that's part of the reason. As I told my daughter the stories, she said, if you don't write them down, she said, they're gone, they're lost forever. So it's a period of history from 1947 to 1963, the years when I would have been growing up there.
So 47. So World War II was winding down, I think.
Yes, yep.
Wow. So so your daughter inspired you to do this, and you started typing away.
Not typing, no. I was never very good at typing.
Okay. So someone was transcribing.
Yes, I wrote it. I wrote the book down longhand, and then my sister did all the typing. She typed the original manuscript.
So all of this writing is longhand by you.
It is, yes, yeah.
Took you how long?
It took me about 6 months to write it, and then, well, it took quite a while for my sister to sort all my scrawlings.
Yes.
And
right.
then my youngest daughter did the editing, and my oldest daughter did all the illustrations, the drawings for the book.
Which are right here in front of me, which you shared with me when you first came in here, which is amazing. And how old are your daughters? They're so talented.
Yeah. The oldest one was born in 1971.
Yeah.
The youngest one was born in 1971, and the oldest one, 1968.
Okay. Wow. I'm so blown away by the level of talent here. This is all in the book. This is incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, most all the drawings refer to a story in the book.
So what is it? Is it basically? And as I said, I haven't had a chance to read it yet. But are they short stories?
Yes,
It's all nonfiction.
That's correct. That's correct. All short stories, some related to the particular type of machinery we used at that time, mostly all horse-drawn, and also of different things that we did as children to amuse ourselves. Some's not good, but,
Yeah.
But
What types of things? I mean, first off, you certainly didn't have a whole heap of time to amuse yourself as a child when you're working the farm, because as you make such a well articulated point, it's that back then you needed the whole family to run a farm.
Well, that's correct. And one of the jobs that we would have to do, well, to begin with, the farmer had a whole different way of. Weather was critical, as it is today, but he couldn't, like today, a farmer can probably go out of his house and pull out his smartphone and, punch in the weather, and it tells him what it's going to be for the next maybe several days or week.
Sure.
And at that time, the farmer went out the door, looked at the sky. Maybe he read a little bit of it in the newspaper, what it was going to be, and had to determine what to do then. The hay cutting process he had to allow for at least 3 to 4 days to dry the hay, which now it's done in, they can mow it and bale it the same day. So it's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
One of the stories in there refers to a raking process, raking the hay, and it's done with a dump rake. And most people have never heard of them. In fact, I had one couple at a book talk that I was at, and they said, "We have this thing in our yard, and you have a picture in your book. What is it?" So I explained it to them.
Isn't that so? What is a dump rake?
A dump rake is, it's a horse-drawn rake. The type we had was a Yankee rake, usually drawn by one horse that was hooked between two fills, and the bale of the rake traveled behind him up over a seat that the driver sat on. And the rake would fill with hay as he traveled over the ground, and then you'd hit a foot trip on the rake and causing the thing to dump, and you'd dump a row of hay that needed to be picked up later on.
So you were literally born into farming. It was a way of life for you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The drying process in itself would, after the hay was cut, and it got to a time, we didn't have a tedder then. There was an old mechanical tedder that some people had, but my father preferred spreading the hay with a fork. So what would happen then is after the hay was cut, he would bring the whole family out, and each one of us take a swath of hay, which consists of probably 7 foot of mowed hay. And each one of us would have a pitchfork, and we'd turn the hay from one side over onto the other. And we had my little sister used a little short handle rake, and she was out there. She was probably 5 at the time. I might have been 7, and the whole family would get out there, and my father on one row, my littlest sister next to him, which he'd help her out. But we'd spread a field that you could pick up in one day, and it would probably be about the size of 4 football fields. So we had to turn all that hay over onto the other side, and that was part of the drying process. But my little sister had to be out there with her short-handled fork, because if she wasn't, that took 2 people out of the equation of spreading that hay.
Of course. That's so amazing to me that a child that young is not only expected to work a field, but also did back then. I mean, I've got a 4-year-old little girl at home, and I just can't imagine.
That's kind of the emphasis of the family farm then. The farming is what you did.
That's right.
It wasn't an obligation. It was the part of what the family did.
Yeah. And there were also a whole heck of a lot less distractions back then too.
Oh, absolutely.
You didn't have your phone pinging off with Facebook Messenger and your friends texting you and TV shows to watch and video games and whatever. You were expected to begin your day and end your day right there on the farm. I couldn't help but think when you were chatting how It seems like the word homesteading has become a word that you hear more often now in our vocabulary. It almost seems like homesteading is something that has been maybe even, dare I say, trendy over the last 10, 15 years or so. Back then, y'all were homesteading without calling it homesteading. You were just simply surviving on the farm.
Yes.
That's what it was.
Yeah, and doing it a green operation then, when we didn't even know what green operation was about, like all the horse work.
Sure.
That was your power. That was your movement on the farm. We didn't use tractors or big equipment like that. It was all done by horses.
And how many acres are we talking about?
Well, at that time, I say 280 acres, but there was 50 acres tillable, which meant that you could plow it and grow crops on it.
Yeah. So the day started early in the morning, I would guess.
Yes, it started then early in the morning, as it still remains to be doing with me now. We were up 4:30 in the morning, and that's when the day began.
All 4 seasons.
Yes, yep.
Wow.
In school, you might when you were in school, you might be allowed to sleep until 5 or so. But
Okay. Wow. But you were out there working your tail off
yes,
all the time.
but it wasn't work. It was part of what the family did.
Yeah, right. Isn't that amazing? Boy, that is a lost, almost, in some regards, a lost concept these days. There are still some families that do this.
Yes, and
There are.
that's the thing that was. I try to encourage a couple of different book talks that I've been to, and there was one young couple, and they had come down to Castleton where I gave the book talk. They were from Huntington. Unfortunately, I don't remember their names now, but they came down from Huntington, and they had a small piece of property there, farm property, only 5 acres. But that's what they were intending to do, was to do some homesteading there.
Sure.
And
I know a family up in Albany. Same story, or similar story. The kids get up. There's 3 kids. They go to school in the morning. And when they come home at the end of the day, they dive right in. And they have a set of chores and a set of expectations. It's never questioned. It's never argued against. It's just a way of life, and they all know what their routine is, and no matter what the weather's doing, they all just jump in as a family, and that's just the way it is. It's remarkable. So tell us about maybe one of the stories, if you want to pick something out of here that you could maybe either translate for us, or
okay,
or maybe read a portion of.
let me see if I can find it quickly.
The Amazon description of your book says, "Take a journey to a special time and place. Barnyards, Barefeet and Bluejeans is a true historical description of how it took an entire family to run a farm during the period just prior to modern mechanization. A time when it took the complete integration of people, animals, and plants to make it a success. And no matter how well you plan, farming is all weather dependent, and how well you adapt to its changes. The coming of age of the children, life lessons taught by parents who learned much of what they passed on to them from the place itself. Hear it all from a very special and wise storyteller who will make you laugh and maybe even cry, but you'll be glad that you have taken the journey with him." Fantastic. I really cannot wait to sit down and read this book, and I'm going to find the time to do just that. A Horse's Tale. So So what is this? What does that mean now?
Well, that's kind of the mystery of the book. When you really think about a horse's tail,
Yeah.
Might give you a clue as to the mystery storyteller.
Yeah. Oh, I get you. All right, I got you. So you've done some book signings.
Yes, yeah, I've done several of them.
Great.
One in Castleton and a couple in Pittsford,
Wow.
and one on our home property there.
And how did you find out about the podcast Aired Out? Curious.
I believe, I'm not sure which paper I read it in, but I think it was the
Rutland
Herald. I
Yeah.
believe. I think there was an article about you doing this particular program, and
Yeah.
and it seemed like a fit for what you were doing. So
I'm all about promoting anybody that's doing something that's unusual and doing something that's good, and something like this is fantastic. I'm hoping that there's some bookstores that are embracing you.
yes, there has been, and particularly, well, I enjoy going to the book talks at the libraries. The
Yeah.
libraries have been really supportive, and it's just the people that come there are curious and they're interested, and it's wonderful talking to the people either about their previous farming experiences
Sure.
or this couple that wants to start it, that wants to get started in homesteading. Or,
Yeah.
I,
Do you think? I'm curious to know your thought about the horse in terms of, we have tractors with belts and hydraulics and fuel and carburetors and all this mechanical stuff where a million things can go wrong. But back then, you literally had to raise your tractor. You had to really take care of your horses because they were the backbone, the machinery behind your survival.
well, the thing of it is, I don't think you can grow up on a farm like I did, especially a family farm during that era, and not really appreciate the animals. You get to really you live with them, and
Sure.
and in particular a horse. And I've noticed it in both horses and dogs. I'm sure there are others. I think the horse actually feels what you think. It's kind of maybe a sixth sense that maybe us humans have lost. They understand how you feel. So if you're feeling good, then they feel that.
Yeah.
And if you're feeling sad, they understand that. And the energy you put off to them is what feelings they will get.
Yeah. So you were expected to just kind of go out and get the horses all ready for the fields and
Yes. I did the first time I did it. I think I was 9 years old, and a draft horse. If you are familiar with draft horses at all, they're quite a large animal, and there's a story about that in the book, but I'll tell you about it, and then I may not need to read about it. But talking about that, I was 9 years old. And my dad was doing a particular thing, but we needed to get the horses ready. So he said, go up and brush them down, and then he says, I'll be up and harness them. But now I need to, he needed to grease his mowing machine so that that would be ready to go next. So I was up there, and I brushed them down, and I thought, well, gosh, probably I can harness them. So
boy.
I went over with the halter first, and I'm just too small to put it on the horse and buckle it on top. So I put it on bottom side up and buckled it on the bottom. Then I had to push the collar up clear to just below his head, where his neck was thinnest, and turned the collar around. So then I had it on the right way. Then the next thing was to put the harness on, which was much heavier than I could handle. So I took it from its hooks and I dragged it over, and still too high to get it on the horse's back. So I climbed the edge of his stall, and on the loose boards there, climbed up and dragged the harness up on first. First to put the hames, which hooked to the collar, and then his back pad with the various straps to it. I dragged that up over the top of him. That will just tell you when I finished. Then I put the back part, which is called the britchin, I put that over and got his tail where it belonged, outside of the harness, and crawled underneath him and grabbed the belly band, which is actually on a saddle would be called the girth, but on a harness it was called the belly band, and had to climb under him in order to get that and bring it across and hook it to the other side. So that being the case, then you had to know what a connection that the horses had to have with humans. He had to be perfectly content and calm, and knowing that I wasn't going to cause him any trouble. I was trying to put his harness on, which was part of what he knew and part of what he would need to draw. So I got the harness on, then hooked put the bridle on him, and took him outside, hooked up the reins, and then I was ready to drive. And I went driving the horses out of the farmyard back to where my father was, feeling like a king, because I'd done it myself, and I think he was feeling like I had done a pretty good thing, a manly thing then, to get the horses out there to him.
Wow.
The first time I'd ever harnessed him alone. But that's to emphasize how well these horses had to be trained so that
Sure.
kids could be around them, and they could be moved and then stopped, and they'd stand there until you wanted to move them again.
It's remarkable.
So.
I'm sure you had a few things go wrong.
Oh, absolutely. Many times. Times.
Can you tell me about one of those?
Well, there's a story in here about each horse has his own personality. And this particular horse that's spoke about mostly in here, I think he had 5 different workmates, and each one of them with their own personality, which he had to adjust to, and he had to adjust them to his way of thinking, so that they would cooperate as he wanted them to. Anyway, the one of the horses was it was a small kind of fidgety little horse that, and the way Dick, the main horse in the team, the way he interpreted it was he thought he liked to be scared. Oh. He liked to be frightened. Anyway, they were using them one day, my father and mother, out on a field out in the further meadow. And my father, at that time, had a little small tractor, and he was harrowing in preparation to seeding. And my mother was out there with the team of horses on the seeder. And she was not using them, but she was staying with them and keeping them calm until my dad finished the harrowing, and then he was going to go right into seeding because they wanted to beat a rainstorm that was coming. So as she was holding them, the fidgety little horse put his head down and he rubbed it on the other horse, which caught the bridle and pulled the bridle off.
Oh, wow.
And as soon as that happened, he started to run. The other horse being, having him start, he went with him. So the whole team was running away, dragging my mother behind by the reins. And she hung on as long as she could until my father was hollered to her to let him go. And so she let him go. My father beat them to the gateway, and he caught him there and circled him, got the bridle
Really?
back on.
Wow. And it sounded like you can just throw it in neutral.
Well, that's the thing, you know. That's why it was critical that they were trained well enough to stand when you wanted them to stand and move what you wanted them to
Yeah.
move.
Any serious injuries that you can recall from the days on the
Well,
farmland?
yes, another little story I'll tell you about. Thinking it was serious at the time, I was a 9-year-old boy helping my. He was a hired hand that worked for my father at that time, and we were picking stones off the meadow, and we loaded them into the wagon that was pulled by horses. After we got the load full, we decided to bring them over and dump the stones in a pile, which was right near a barbed wire fence, but it was off the meadowland. So we were unloading them, and at a 9-year-old boy, he's got to find something to do rather than the tedium of the job that he's doing. So as I was doing it, the stones were probably about the size of a football, or maybe a little bit smaller, those that wouldn't smooth in.
Mm-hmm.
So we were unloading them, and, well, I had this stone, and I thought, well, I'll see if I could hit that other stone on the pile. So I threw it and, continued doing that for a while as the hired hand was down below me working with a fork. He was unloading as well. And as I threw one stone, it hit the barbed wire. And it came back and it hit that fellow right in the side of the head. So he went right down, right on his back, and didn't move. He was unconscious.
Oh, wow.
So then what does a 9-year-old boy think? A 9-year-old boy thinks, you killed him. So I thought the poor man was dead. But then immediately I started worrying about myself. You've just committed a murder here. You've just killed this man. So that means, at that time, that meant, I was going to be arrested because I had murdered someone. I was going to the electric chair.
Sure.
So the whole process was really traumatic. Not as much for the poor old man who'd just been injured, but for myself, the trauma I was going through. So anyway, I'm watching the old guy. Well, what do I do now? I mean, I guess I've got to tell my father, but if I do, what's the eventual outcome? Yeah. So anyway, as I'm worrying about it, finally, the fellow starts to move, and he regains consciousness, and eventually stands up, and I'm crying because of what I'd done,
Wow.
And the old fellow says, well, don't you worry about it. He said, that was only an accident. He says, that can happen to anybody. And so the whole thing was fine from that point on, but was quite an experience for me.
Wow.
And that's an example of the kind of stories and the things that goes through a young kid's mind as he's growing up.
I can't help but wonder if you and your wife have ever been to the Tunbridge Fair to see the barn up there that's full of the old farming equipment.
Yes, we have.
You have?
Yes, we have. Yeah, we've been there several times.
What do you think of that?
I do. Of any fair around, I enjoy that one the most. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had a little bit of ice overspill the banks there and fill the fairground.
Yes. Yeah.
A month and a half ago or so, but a little bit of damage. But I guess they're going to be okay.
Yeah. My wife has a sister who lives right over the hill.
In Vermonter.
Vermonter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful town.
Yeah.
Beautiful town. So how have things changed just outside of your little bubble of just under 300 acres there and that beautiful part of Vermont? How have things changed? I mean, you've seen some changes up and down Route 7 and up and down Route 4 a little bit.
Absolutely. In that particular area where we live, I think there's only one, what I call working dairy farm left.
Yeah.
All the rest of them have sort of gone out of business in one way or another. Some of the cropland is still being done. My neighbor, who's mentioned in the book, Sonny Poromsky, childhood friend. We grew up together, and he's still operating his. He's still doing his own cropland, but of course now everything is done by tractor. But he still has a team of horses and gets them out whenever he has time, and has his own sawmill. So.
I would imagine that over the course of your life, you probably haven't had much time to travel, but maybe I'm wrong. Where have you been?
Well,
in the world?
Yeah, not much time up until my wife and I were married, but after that we have traveled quite a bit. We've taken a trip to, we've been down and visited my sister in Florida, and then we had taken a trip to Utah and Arizona and out that way, a couple of national parks, Zion.
Yeah, Zion, beautiful.
And
my mom and dad have been there.
And Bryce Canyon.
Yeah.
And then my wife and I think it was 2006, we went to Hawaii and spent a week, I guess a little more than a week out there.
Good for you. Are you in touch with any family from distant lands at all? You have any families you have real far away?
My sister, I guess maybe the furthest of the immediate family. She has a house in Florida where she lives in the winter, and then she moves to North Carolina in the summer.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. We talk about weather and farming and how critical it was back then, and you mentioned how easy it is to get the information now at the tip of your finger, so lightning fast. What's your take? I'm so curious. I've asked a few farmers over the last, I don't know, few years or so, when I do get a chance to meet them, what their take is, what their thoughts are on global warming or climate change. Do you have any thoughts or feelings about that at all?
Well, I think it's definitely a factor. Although there was many mornings this past winter when I'd get up and I'd say to myself, do I really see a change? When the weather was down 0 or below with the wind blowing.
Right.
I think it's to my way of thinking, it's more cyclical than it is man-made. Certainly, man is a factor, but I think we're overemphasizing our importance if we think we can change Mother Nature that much.
Yeah, interesting. There's been so much chat lately about the depleting ozone layer and what have you. But yeah, it's a controversial topic, obviously, and it seems to be more so with every month that passes. Anyway, yeah. At least if you have the TV on enough.
Yes, and it kind of depends on which side of the development your money is coming from.
That's right. Yes, very true. Good point. What's the takeaway from this book? What are we gonna be left with when we finish reading this book?
Well, I don't know. It's been said by an educator that if you can read, you should read this book. And if you can't read, you should have it read to you. So to me, it's a book for all ages. And I don't know, I think there's a lot in it besides farm machinery and family living. There's a lot of, the narrator, a wise old character, and he has some philosophies in there. If you really listen, really think about them, I think he has a few things to teach you.
What do you remember most? If you had to take away one thing from your dad, what was the most profound thing you think he taught you?
Well, the most profound thing is, and I think I've stated that in the dedication. I dedicated the book to my cousin, who we lost to cancer. I also dedicated it to my mother, who we lost to cancer also. She battled with that for quite some time. And I also dedicated it to my father. And the way I stated it and the way I felt about my father was that when I was a little boy, I walked in his shadow, or tried to, and I'd say to myself, Lord, let me be like him. And still, as I walk his land, and a cloud passes over and casts that big shadow over me, I think back and I say, Lord, let me be like him.
Wow.
It's something to strive for. I'll never make it, but at least I have something to try for.
It's funny that you say that. I have felt that way, and still do, about my own dad. I have a stepdad who raised me, although I've never referred to him as my stepdad, but he raised me since I was maybe 3 or 4 years old, and was just my best friend, my rock, the man that I admired more than, and still do today, more than anyone that I ever have. He's just a remarkable human being. Taught me more than anyone has ever taught me.
Yes.
About life.
Yeah. There's a chapter in there also about my parents took in foster children for quite a number of years, and there's a chapter in there about the farm, about the foster children, and what they gained from their relationship with us, with my parents, and with myself and my siblings. And there's also something they learned from the animals, because you can't live in nature in that close a proximity to animals without them teaching you something.
At some point, it's going to happen. Yeah, that's for sure. Were mom and dad strict?
Strict in a different kind of way. I think it was more out of, if there was a disciplinarian, I guess it was my mom. Just because of her small stature, she had to, and because of the fact that my father was constantly busy working on the farm, she had to be more of the disciplinarian, and we needed it. But I think the main factor was out of respect, out of trying not to do anything that disappointed them. I mean, you can't help it. A kid is going to mess up now and then, as you'll see if you read the story. I did many times, Yeah. But
my brother was fooling around one day with my mom's 70 or 71 VW Bug, and thought he had it in reverse, but he had it in first. You know, those German transmissions. And I think he was maybe 14 or 15 years old. And, of course, Mom and Dad weren't home. And he thought he was the cool kid in the neighborhood showing off, and wanted to move the car, and popped the clutch and went right through the garage door and ended up in the garage. Did all kinds of damage to, obviously, everything, the car included. And just sat there in fear, waiting for my dad to come home. And he'll tell you, to this day, at 50 years old, my brother will tell you that the hardest thing that was ever said to him was when my dad came home and said, "I'm really disappointed in you." That was, wow. I mean, that just, that crushed him. Yeah. That crushed him. I think it would have been a whole lot easier if he had gone off flying and yelling and hollering and, said, you're grounded for 2 weeks and that's the end of it or whatever. But just the D word, disappointment. Ouch. Yeah.
Well, that's and my father had a way of saying it. My mother had what she cooked on was a wood cook stove.
Wood, yeah, wow.
Jeez. So in the process of doing that, my only household responsibility was to keep the wood box full for her.
Sure.
And so there was one morning when it took her a little longer to get going because there was no wood in the wood box. And so my father just came in and he found this out. And my father never really hollered unless...
Didn't need to.
Unless he got to the point where he had to use some curse words. And he had a few that he would use, but you didn't go aggravating that situation if you didn't have to.
Yeah.
But anyway, he came into the house that morning that the wood box was empty, and he just looked at me and he said, my nickname was Brud. Some people still use that, but he looked at me and he says, Brud, he said, you know better than that.
And that's all he had to say, huh?
That's it. That was it.
Ugh. Wow.
And when you speak about the old car and your brother, there's several stories in the book about the doodlebug I had.
What's you had a bug?
Yes. Well, it wasn't a Volkswagen. It was that's a term that we used for. It was kind of a semi-truck tractor.
Yeah.
It was a Ford Model A.
Oh, wow.
Truck, but the frame was cut down and it was shortened up so that it looked more like a tractor. And I drove that all over the place. I had it for about a year or a little bit more, and then was encouraged to get rid of it because of the trouble I got into with it.
I've got a friend who has a 28 Model A pickup.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. And with the oak suspension. Am I right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it was made out of oak.
Yeah.
And he was telling me about we were talking about the suspension in those vehicles, and he was telling me something about that there was a guy who I'm sure I don't have this right. You might be able to correct me. There was a guy by the name of King who used to collect the oak suspensions from those old Model A's, and he would, I guess, make charcoal out of it, and that's how King's Ford charcoal
Yeah.
came to be.
No kidding. Yeah.
Had you ever heard that one before?
I had not heard that. No. This particular one I had well, it had no rear springs at all. It just had a front spring running. Let's see, it ran horizontally underneath the engine.
Wow.
Yeah, over the front wheels.
Yeah, some of these restored Model A's and Model T's are so impressive. I know. I'm sure you've seen them. They're so impressive. I mean, a lot of money goes into those.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
To get the parts and everything. But, did you ever get into any, what do you remember out of your teenage years?
Teenage years?
Especially your late teens. Did you ever get into any trouble during that decade or so of your life?
Quite a few times we'd be in trouble, and particularly, we had at that time, and there's something I really regret, as I haven't been able to find him. We used to have a fresh air child that came and stayed with us.
Yeah.
He's mentioned in the book as well.
Yes.
He was right from the Bronx in New York City.
Yeah.
And as we got into our teen years, first off, he came all the way up through all the years that he could come, from the time he was, I think, 5 until he was 15. And then he came on his own. He'd come every summer and stay all summer.
Amazing.
So him and I were always, you push the envelope a little bit, and you're trying things that, well, you probably shouldn't, but
Sure.
you've got to get right up there on the razor's edge.
Sure.
And how do you know you're actually on the razor's edge unless you go over the other side?
Of course. Of course. Well, you're still alive to tell the stories.
Oh,
So.
yes. Anyway, this fresh air child, his name was Mike Horan. Eventually moved to Houston with his family, and we haven't been able to contact him since. But that's one thing I'd love to do, is contact this fellow, and we've tried several times and haven't been able to do it.
Mike Horan? How do you spell his last name?
Horan.
Wow.
Michael James Joseph Horan.
Whoa. Michael James Joseph Horan, Houston.
Yes, that's the last we've heard of him. Yeah.
And when was that, if you had to guess?
The last time we heard from him, probably, I don't know, probably the last time I talked to him, I think, was 1993.
Wow.
When my mom died.
Wow. Well,
but my sisters may have had contact after that, but not much after that.
I'll do some Googling too.
I'm sorry?
I'll do some Googling as well, and we'll see if we can track down. So it's easy to do these days with the computer, you know.
Yes, I know you can, but like, as far as my technology, modern technology goes, I haven't even got to a digital watch yet. But.
Well, you and I are going to be in touch, my friend. I have thoroughly enjoyed having you on. Again, the book is called Barnyards, Barefeet and Bluejeans, A Horse's Tale by Alan Mills Jr. This is a definite read. I'm telling you, pick it up. In Rutland, you can get it on Amazon too, right?
Yes, you can. Yeah. You go to Amazon and click on.
You just punch it in
with the book title. Yeah. And then you click on Indie Press, and you can get it there.
I really want to thank you for coming in. It has been an absolute pleasure. I wish you all the best of luck. Maybe one of these days I'll hop on the motorcycle and zip down there and see you on some nice summer day.
Yes, travel up into Allen Mills Road.
You got it.
It doesn't have a sign when you get up in there, but you'll know it. Shangri-La.
I
I hope so. That would be so much fun this summer. Thank you, Alan Mills, our author in the spotlight this time around on Aired Out, brought to you by Peak Entertainment of Vermont and New Hampshire, FGB Theaters, the Capitol Showplace in Montpelier, and Paramount Theater in Barrie, CBDCrave.com, Fontaine Forestry and Millworks of East Montpelier, and CW Print and Designs in Barrie. I'm J.D. Green. This is Aired Out. Thanks so much for tuning in, subscribing to the channel. We'll catch you next time.